The final few words of verse 28 have Peter saying that God showed him not to call any man common or unclean. How did God show him this? By means of that vision of the creatures inside a sheet that was being lowered down from heaven. Now, I'd like to put the final nail into the coffin of the incorrect doctrinal teaching that this vision had to do with food. That is, I'm saying that this vision was not at all about God abrogating Levitical food laws, as is a kind of a standard Christian doctrine. Rather, the vision of the unclean animals was merely symbolic of something else, since the vision was essentially a parable. Now, I've made my case on this sufficiently that all I could do at this point is repeat myself. So, I'd like instead to quote to you from a revered early church father, the Venerable Bade, an English monk who lived and wrote about 700 AD. Now, this excerpt I'm going to quote to you from is taken from his commentary on the book of Acts. He says this: I am amazed at how some people interpret this as having to do with certain foods that were prohibited by the old law, but that are now to be consumed, since neither serpents nor reptiles can be eaten. Nor did Peter himself understand it in this way. Rather, he understood it as meaning that all people are equally called to the gospel of Christ, and that nothing is naturally defiled. For when he was reproached, he explained the symbolism of this vision, not as giving the reason why he ate beasts, but why he associated with Gentiles. Quite correct. While food was used for symbolism, the vision wasn't about food. So while some might say that when I teach you that the Levitical food laws were not abolished and that this vision parable given to Peter certainly didn't do so, because this had nothing to do with food in the first place, it's because I have a Hebrew roots or Messianic theology. But here we have a Gentile English Christian monk, an early church father of great repute, saying exactly the same thing 1,300 years ago, and he was flabbergasted that some of his fellow Christians just couldn't see it. You see, while there's no danger to us in considering something unclean, and then we avoid it, even if that object in reality is ritually clean, there is danger in considering something clean, especially when God says the object is unclean, and we partake of it anyway. That's where the problem is. That is precisely what worried the Jews about coming into contact with Gentiles. That was the issue. So the attitude was developed, better safe than sorry. Better to err on the side of considering Gentiles and everything they contact unclean, thus avoiding them, than to consider them clean and be wrong, thus becoming personally, ritually defiled. Now, I know this is so hard for us to wrap our minds around, because this thought process has never held a place in Gentile Christian life or discussion. For some reason, centuries ago, the spiritual states of clean and unclean have been removed from Christian thought and ideology. But it's biblical. It is historical. It remains in effect. Gentiles have simply been ignorant of it, usually because it's explained only in the Old Testament. And this ignorance has at times led to a gross misunderstanding of some New Testament scripture passages.